The heavy door of the estate clicked shut behind Dante Moretti as he stepped into the marble hallway earlier than anyone expected. The late afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. He loosened his tie with one hand, the weight of the day still pressing on his shoulders. Blood hadn't been spilled tonight, but threats had been made, deals had been sealed, and his presence alone had been enough to make grown men fear for their lives. That was the life he knew. That was the only life he understood. But as he moved toward the staircase, something stopped him. A sound. Soft and delicate. A voice he didn't recognize. Singing words he couldn't quite make out. It drifted down from the second floor like a whisper carried on the wind. Dante's hand froze on the banister. His daughter's room. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, his instincts sharp. He wasn't a man who believed in coincidences or let his guard down, not even in his own home. The closer he got, the clearer the melody became. It was gentle, almost fragile. The kind of song a mother might sing to soothe a restless child. He reached the doorway and stopped. Through the crack in the door, he saw her. The maid, Elena. She was sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, cradling 4-year-old Sophia in her arms. The little girl's head rested against Elena's chest, her tiny fingers clutching the fabric of the maid's simple dress. Elena rocked her gently, her voice soft and steady, filling the room with a warmth Dante hadn't felt in years. Sophia's eyes were half closed, her breathing calm, her face peaceful in a way he rarely saw anymore. Dante didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching a scene that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The light from the window fell across them both, painting them in gold. For a moment, the weight he carried every day seemed to lift. Then, Elena's voice faltered. She looked up and saw him. Her eyes went wide. The color drained from her face. She immediately stopped singing and tried to stand, but Sophia's grip tightened, refusing to let go. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti," Elena stammered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know you were home. She was crying, and I thought—" Dante said nothing. He stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard the stories. Everyone who worked in this house had. Dante Moretti was not a man who tolerated mistakes. He was not a man who forgave easily. She braced herself for anger, for a sharp command to leave and never come back. But instead, he simply looked at his daughter. Sophia's face was still buried against Elena's shoulder, her small body relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in months. "Why is she holding you like that?" His voice was quiet, almost too quiet. It wasn't a demand. It was a question, but one that carried weight. Elena swallowed hard. "She was upset, sir. She wouldn't stop crying. I tried everything. But then I remembered my mother used to sing to me when I was scared. So I sang to her. I didn't mean to overstep. I'm sorry." Dante's gaze moved from his daughter to the maid. Elena looked terrified, but she didn't let go of Sophia. She held her protectively, as if shielding her from the world. From him, that realization cut deeper than he expected. He studied them both in silence. The room was still. The only sound was Sophia's soft breathing. Then Sophia stirred. She lifted her head and looked at her father with sleepy eyes. "Papa," she whispered, "Elena makes me feel safe." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Dante's jaw tightened. His daughter had always been distant with him. She never ran to him when she was scared. She never reached for him when she cried. He had told himself it was because of his work, because of the life he led, because she was too young to understand. But now, hearing her say those words to someone else, he realized the truth. His daughter didn't feel safe with him. She felt safe with a stranger. He stood there, unmoving, his mind racing. Elena watched him carefully, still holding Sophia close. She expected him to tell her to leave. She expected him to take his daughter and walk away, but he didn't. Instead, he spoke, his voice softer than before. "Don't stop." Elena blinked. "Sir, keep singing," he said. Then he pulled a chair from the corner of the room and sat down. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving them. "I want to hear it." Elena hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of test. But Sophia looked up at her with hopeful eyes, and she couldn't refuse. She took a breath and began to sing again, her voice trembling at first, then growing steadier. The melody filled the room once more. Sophia's eyes closed, and a small smile appeared on her lips. Dante watched in silence. His face was hard to read, but something in his expression had changed. The sharp edges softened. The cold distance melted just a little. For the first time in a long time, he looked like a man who had forgotten how to be human and was only now remembering. The song ended, but the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with something neither of them could name. Sophia had fallen completely asleep, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Elena carefully adjusted her position, making sure the little girl was comfortable before she attempted to stand. But Dante raised his hand slightly, stopping her. "Let her rest," he said quietly. "You don't need to move yet." Elena nodded and settled back into her position, her arms still cradling Sophia protectively. She could feel Dante's eyes on her, studying her with an intensity that made her nervous. She wanted to ask what he was thinking, but she didn't dare. This man was her employer, a man whose reputation preceded him everywhere he went. She had only been working in his home for 3 weeks, and already she had crossed a line she hadn't known existed. "How long have you been doing this?" Dante asked suddenly. Elena looked up, confused. "Singing to her? Taking care of her like this?" His voice was steady but curious. "Like she's yours." Elena's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry if I overstepped, Mr. Moretti. I just couldn't stand to hear her cry. She seemed so alone, and You didn't overstep," Dante interrupted. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was firm. "I'm asking because I want to know." Elena took a breath. "This is the first time, sir. I've only been tucking her in and reading her stories before bed. But today, she was inconsolable. Nothing I tried worked until I sang. My mother used to do the same for me when I was little. It always helped." Dante nodded slowly, his gaze moving back to his daughter. "She doesn't cry like that often. But, when she does, no one can calm her down. Not the nannies. Not me." There was a vulnerability in his voice that surprised Elena. "She's just a little girl," Elena said softly. "Sometimes they just need to feel like someone understands, like someone is there, no matter what." Dante's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them. An understanding. A recognition. He stood from the chair and walked to the door, pausing before he left. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, he was gone, leaving Elena alone with the sleeping child, and a heart that felt strangely full. If you're feeling the emotion in this story, don't just listen. Stay with it. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we let ourselves feel. This story is about more than a mafia boss and a maid. It's about broken people finding pieces of themselves in the last place they expected. Keep listening. Let it reach you. Because what happens next will change everything. The days that followed were different. Elena couldn't explain it, but she felt the shift in the house. Dante Moretti didn't speak to her much, but he watched. She would catch his eyes on her when she played with Sophia in the garden. She would see him standing in the shadows when she tucked the little girl into bed. He never interrupted. He never smiled. But he was always there, silent and observing, like a ghost who couldn't let go. Sophia, on the other hand, had become a different child. She laughed more. She ran through the hallways with a joy that had been missing for months. She asked for Elena constantly, reaching for her hand whenever she entered the room. The other staff noticed. They whispered among themselves, wondering what kind of magic the new maid had worked on the boss's daughter. But Elena didn't think of it as magic. She simply treated Sophia the way every child deserved to be treated, with kindness, with patience, with love. One afternoon, Sophia tugged on Elena's sleeve as they sat on the floor of the playroom, surrounded by dolls and building blocks. "Will you always stay with me?" the little girl asked, her big brown eyes searching Elena's face with a hope that made Elena's heart ache. Elena smiled gently and brushed a strand of hair from Sophia's forehead. "As long as you need me, sweet girl." Sophia's face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Promise?" Elena hesitated. She didn't know if she could make that promise. This wasn't her home. She was just a maid, someone who could be dismissed at any moment for any reason. But looking into those hopeful eyes, she couldn't bring herself to say no. "I promise." From the doorway, Dante heard every word. He didn't know why he kept coming back to watch them. He told himself it was because he wanted to make sure his daughter was being cared for properly. But deep down, he knew the truth. He came because something about the way Elena looked at Sophia reminded him of a life he'd lost. A warmth he'd forgotten. A feeling he didn't have a name for anymore. His late wife had been gone for 2 years now, taken by an illness that even all his money and power couldn't stop. Since then, Sophia had withdrawn into herself, becoming quiet and distant. He had tried everything to bring her back, but nothing worked, until Elena. He watched as Sophia laughed at something Elena said, her small hands clapping together with pure joy. When was the last time he had heard his daughter laugh like that? When was the last time he had seen her smile without sadness hiding behind it? He couldn't remember, and the realization hurt more than any bullet wound he'd ever received. That night, Sophia woke up crying. Her small body burned with fever, her face flushed and damp with sweat. Elena heard her from the room next door and rushed in immediately, not bothering to put on her robe or slippers. She pressed a cool cloth to Sophia's forehead, whispering soothing words as the little girl whimpered in pain. Elena sent one of the staff to wake Dante. But by the time he arrived, she had already stripped Sophia's blankets, opened the window to let in cool air, and was carefully giving her small sips of water. Dante stood in the doorway, watching as Elena worked with calm efficiency. She didn't panic. She didn't hesitate. She moved like someone who had done this before, someone who knew exactly what a child needed. Sophia clung to her, refusing to let go, even as the fever made her shiver. "Should I call a doctor?" Dante asked, his voice tight with worry. Elena looked up at him, and he could see the determination in her eyes. "I already did, sir. He's on his way. But she'll be okay. It's just a fever. She needs rest and care." Dante nodded slowly, but he didn't leave. He couldn't. He pulled a chair close and sat down, his eyes never leaving his daughter. For hours, the three of them stayed in that room. Elena sang softly, her voice a constant presence in the dark. Sophia drifted in and out of sleep, her small hand gripping Elena's tightly, and Dante watched them both, his mind heavy with thoughts he couldn't sort through. He saw the way Elena stroked Sophia's hair, the way she adjusted the cloth on her forehead every few minutes, the way she never once complained about being tired or uncomfortable. This woman, who owed them nothing, who could have simply done the minimum required of her job, was giving everything she had to comfort his daughter. As the night stretched on, Elena's exhaustion began to show. Her eyes grew heavy, her voice softer. But she didn't stop. She kept singing, kept rocking Sophia gently, kept being the steady presence the child needed. Eventually, Sophia's fever broke. Her breathing evened out. Her body relaxed, and Elena, still holding her, finally closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, her head resting against the back of the chair. Dante stood and, walked to the bed. He looked down at them both. Sophia's small body was curled against Elena, her face peaceful for the first time all night. Elena's arm was still wrapped around her protectively, even in sleep. For a long moment, Dante just stood there, taking in the sight before him. Then he reached for the blanket at the foot of the bed and carefully draped it over both of them. His hand lingered for just a second on Sophia's forehead, checking for fever one last time. When he was satisfied, he stepped back. But he didn't leave. He returned to his chair and sat down, watching over them as the first light of dawn crept through the window. Something had shifted inside him, something he couldn't name but couldn't ignore. This woman, this stranger, had become important, not just to his daughter, to him. A week later, word reached Dante that one of his rivals had made a move. A threat had been issued. Names had been dropped, and among them, his daughter's name. The rage that filled him was cold and sharp, the kind of anger that made men disappear without a trace. He called his men together in his office and gave orders with a voice that left no room for argument. His home was to be locked down. Guards were to be stationed at every entrance, every window, every possible point of entry, and Elena and Sophia were not to leave the estate under any circumstances. When Elena heard the news from one of the other staff members, she didn't understand at first. She found Dante in his office late that evening, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the darkened grounds. "Mr. Moretti," she said quietly, standing in the doorway. "I heard about the guards. Is Sophia in danger?" He didn't turn around. "Yes." Her breath caught in her throat. "What should I do?" "Stay close to her," he said, his voice flat and cold in a way she hadn't heard since her first day. "Don't let her out of your sight. Don't take her outside. Don't open doors for anyone you don't know." Elena nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Of course. I'll keep her safe. I promise." Dante finally turned to look at her. Two. His eyes were dark, heavy with something she couldn't read. "This isn't just about her." Elena blinked, confused. "I don't understand." "You're a target too now," he said flatly. "Anyone who knows how much my daughter depends on you will use that. They'll use you to get to her, to get to me. So you stay here. You stay protected. You don't take risks. You don't leave." Her heart pounded in her chest. "Why would anyone care about me? I'm just—" "You're not just anything," Dante interrupted, his voice sharp. "Not anymore, because she's not the only one who needs you." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Elena's breath hitched. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't distant. It was something else. Something raw and unguarded and terrifying in its honesty. Before she could speak, he turned and walked past her, leaving her standing alone in the doorway with her heart racing and her mind spinning with questions she didn't know how to ask. From that night on, everything changed. Dante no longer kept his distance. He ate dinner with Sophia and Elena, sitting at the head of the table while they talked about their day. He listened when Sophia told stories about the flowers in the garden and the birds she had seen from her window. He watched as Elena braided Sophia's hair with gentle hands and read her bedtime stories in that soft, soothing voice. And when Elena sang, he stayed. He didn't hide in the doorway anymore. He came into the room, sat down in the chair beside the bed, and listened like a man starving for something he'd lost long ago. One evening, as Elena finished a lullaby and Sophia drifted off to sleep with a smile on her lips, Dante spoke. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Elena looked up, surprised by the question. "My mother. She used to sing to me every night when I was little, even when things were hard. Even when we didn't have much. She always made time to sing." "She taught you well." Elena smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "She taught me a lot of things. she said a kind voice could calm even the wildest storm. That sometimes people just need to know someone cares enough to try. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Elena's voice grew quieter, more distant. She passed away a few years ago. Cancer. I took care of her until the end, and she sang even then. Even when she was in pain, she sang to make me feel better. Dante nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Elena glanced down at Sophia, brushing a strand of hair from the mender. Aided, like, the child's face with tender fingers. But I think she'd be happy knowing I'm using what she taught me to help someone else, to make a difference in a little girl's life. Dante watched her for a long moment, his eyes tracing the gentle way she touched his daughter, the soft expression on her face. You've done more than help. You've brought something back to this house that I thought was gone forever. He stood and walked to the door, pausing only to glance back at her one last time. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Don't stop singing, Elena. Not for her, not for me. Then he left, and Elena was alone with the sleeping child, and a heart that suddenly felt too full, too confused, too aware of feelings she had no right to have. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between them all grew stronger with each passing hour. Sophia called for Elena every morning the moment she woke up and refused to sleep without her at night. Dante found himself looking forward to the evenings, to the sound of that gentle voice filling his home with warmth and light. He didn't know when it had happened. But somewhere along the way, Elena had stopped being just the maid. She had become part of the fabric of his life, part of the heartbeat of his home, part of something he hadn't realized he was building until it was already there. One night, after Sophia had fallen asleep and the house had grown quiet, Dante found Elena sitting alone in the small library, a book in her lap, and the soft glow of a lamp illuminating her face. She looked up when he entered, surprised. Mr. Moretti, I didn't hear you come in. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said. Though he made no move to leave, you're not disturbing me. She closed the book and set it aside, giving him her full attention. Is something wrong? Is Sophia okay? She's fine. She's sleeping. Dante walked to the window and looked out at the dark garden beyond, his hands in his pockets. I've been thinking. About what? About how different this house feels now. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression caught her off guard. You've changed it. You've changed everything. Elena shook her head, uncomfortable with the weight of his words. I haven't changed anything. I'm just doing my job. No, Dante said firmly, taking a step closer. You've done more than that. You've given my daughter something I couldn't give her, something I didn't know how to give her. You've given her peace. You've given her joy. You've given her a reason to smile again. He paused, his voice dropping lower, becoming almost rough with emotion. And you've given me something I didn't know I needed. Elena's breath caught in her throat. What's that? He took another step. Lessness. And he took another step, closer, and now they were only a few feet apart. A reason to come home. A reason to walk through that door every evening and actually want to be here, instead of finding another excuse to stay away. You've reminded me what it feels like to have something worth protecting beyond power and money and reputation. The room went silent except for the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond to this man who had been a stranger just weeks ago and now looked at her like she was the only thing holding him together. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't have to understand, Dante said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. Just know that you're not leaving, not unless you want to, and even then, I'll do everything I can to convince you to stay, because this family needs you, my daughter needs you, and he stopped himself, his jaw tightening as if he was holding back words that were too big, too important, too dangerous to say out loud. Elena's eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think you're just an employee. You're not. You haven't been for a long time." His voice was raw now, stripped of all the armor he usually wore. "Because I need you to know that what you do here matters. That you matter. Not just to Sophia. To me." He didn't wait for her response. He turned and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Elena sitting alone with tears streaming down her face and a heart that felt like it might burst from everything she was feeling. The final evening came quietly, like the closing of a gentle hand. The threat that had loomed over them had been dealt with. Dante's enemies had been reminded why it was dangerous to cross him, and the message had been received loud and clear. The guards remained, but the tension had eased. Life in the estate returned to a calm rhythm, though it was different now. Warmer, fuller, more like a home, and less like a fortress. And as the sun set, casting the house in a warm, golden glow, Elena found herself in Sophia's room once again, just as she had been that very first day. Sophia was curled up in bed, her favorite stuffed bear tucked under her arm, her eyes already growing heavy. "Will you sing to me, Elena?" "Of course, sweet girl." Elena sat on the edge of the bed and began to sing. The melody was soft and familiar, the same one she had sung that very first day when everything had changed. From the doorway, Dante stood watching. He remembered that day with perfect clarity. He remembered the shock of hearing that voice for the first time, the disbelief at seeing his daughter so content in someone else's arms, the slow realization that something had changed in him, something fundamental and irreversible. He hadn't known what it was then, but he knew now. This time, he didn't stay in the doorway. He walked into the room with quiet steps and sat down in the chair beside the bed, the same chair he had pulled close that first evening. Elena glanced at him, surprised, but not stopping. She kept singing, her voice filling the space between them with warmth and light and something that felt like coming home. Sophia's eyes fluttered closed, a peaceful smile on her lips. When the song ended, Dante leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He looked at his daughter, then at Elena, and the expression on his face was completely open for the first time since she'd met him. "Don't stop," he said quietly. Elena tilted her head, confused. "She's already asleep." "I know." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was no wall between them. No distance, no fear. Just truth. Just everything he'd been holding back, finally coming to the surface. "But I'm not ready for it to end." Elena's breath caught. She understood. She saw it in his eyes, heard it in his voice, felt it in the air between them. This wasn't just about a lullaby. It was about everything. The safety, the warmth, the feeling of being wanted and needed and valued, the feeling of finally belonging somewhere. She smiled softly, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then she began to sing again, quieter this time, more intimate. Just for him. Dante closed his eyes and listened. The weight he had carried for so long felt lighter than it had in years. The cold that had surrounded his heart, the ice that had kept everyone at a distance, was completely gone. And in that small room, with his daughter asleep and Elena's voice wrapping around him like a gentle embrace, he finally felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt peace. He felt hope. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he deserved this second chance at happiness. When the song ended, Elena stayed where she was, and Dante opened his eyes. They looked at each other in the soft lamplight, and no words were needed. Everything that mattered had already been said in the silence, in the songs, in the way they had slowly become a family without even realizing it was happening. Dante reached out and gently placed his hand over hers where it rested on the bed. His touch was warm and steady, and full of promise. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything. For her. For me. For reminding me what home is supposed to feel like." Elena's tears finally spilled over. But they were good tears. Happy tears. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered back. I promised her. "And I'm promising you too." Dante's grip tightened slightly, and he nodded. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe the darkness wasn't all there was. That maybe there was light, too, and it was sitting right here beside him, singing songs to his daughter, and slowly, carefully, singing life back into his broken heart. You've just witnessed something rare. A story where love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures, but grows quietly in the spaces between words, where broken hearts find healing in the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, then carry that feeling with you. Share it with someone who needs to remember that even the coldest heart can learn to feel again, that even the most broken family can be made whole. Because sometimes the greatest strength isn't in holding on to who we used to be, but in letting someone new show us who we can become. Don't just listen to stories like this. Let them change you. Even a mafia boss can be changed by one gentle moment. Before you go, drop your country in the comments. Let him know how far this story reached. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.